I feel like the 2025 tennis season will be such an important year in both the women's and just the men's sort of tennis progression history, because I feel like it's sort of a symbol of a transition period, and I think 2025 will prove to us if we've successfully transitioned or if we are still stuck in the Big Four era, for example. Welcome, tennis fans, to Tennis Traverse, Exploring the Game, the podcast that delves into the heart of the tennis world. I'm your host, Ivy Zhang, and in today's episode, I want to talk about tournaments that fans should look forward to in the 2025 tennis season. So before we begin, I still want to say that because I'm in China, I'm using the microphone mic on my iPhone, so the sound might be a little bit weird, and I'm sorry if you guys can hear in the background there's someone that's coming over to fix our heating thing because it's really cold here, and I think my mom's vacuuming as well, so that's why it can get a little bit loud, and because I don't have my noise canceling thing, so there might be just some random noises outside. So yeah, but apart from that, let's get right into today's episode. So I want to start off by talking about the 4 main Grand Slam tournaments that I think are just a staple every year. And let's start with the Australian Open. So I think the Australian Open is an interesting tournament because obviously it's the first Grand Slam of the year. But apart from that, this year is especially interesting just because of the 2 doping scandals that's been going on, which are both just some incredible players. The first one being Iga Swiatek. We've actually never seen her play after her doping scandal was publicized, so we really don't know how that's going to affect her game. I think I also talked about it in the last episode. It's just when something that huge is announced, you're really caught off guard with what it can do to you. So I'm really interested, I think, in how it will affect her game. And I think normally she really, I feel like, doesn't start off well in Australia. So last year she lost to Linda Noskova. And I think Australia has often been, I feel like, a rough starting tournament for her. I feel like she really peaks during Indian Wells and Miami, and then throughout the Roland Garros season, but I feel like at the start of the year she really needs to find her footing, and I just don't know how the doping scandal will affect her. I think it can be both positive and negative. I can see it in a positive way because I feel like it will motivate her to do well, and just getting that off her mind and everyone knowing about it will just make her loosen up and just play because she doesn't have that burden to her anymore. But at the same time, I could see it as a negative thing that can get into her head because she will be just hyper fixated on how other people will judge her despite even winning a title because of the doping scandal. So I think that's something we really need to look forward to, and I'm also interested in seeing how Sabalenka will maybe try to defend and win Australia for the 3 times in a row, because that's such an incredible feat. And I think last season she was the best hardcore player by a mile. I feel like she always dominated, especially in Australia. I feel like she often started the year off great, but at the same time, there are a lot of players that wasn't here to challenge her last year, such as Karolina Mukova, who had an amazing, well, not an amazing end, but she had a great run at the US Open, and I feel like just her game against Sabalenka's is something that I'm really looking forward to, as well as Zheng Qinwen, who I know have a matchup problem with Sabalenka because Zheng Qinwen hasn't won a single match, but she's getting closer and closer, so I'm interested to see how that dynamics played out, as well as Elena Rybakina, who last year actually beat Sabalenka in the tournament prior to the Australian Open with a score of 6-0, 6-3. So she clearly have the capabilities and the abilities of challenging Sabalenka, but the only problem is she just didn't have a great year. She withdrew from a lot of tournaments in 2024, but this year she actually switched her coach and partnered up with Gordon, who was Djokovic's former coach. So I feel like that is something that we should also look forward to. And I forgot to mention Naomi Osaka and Iga Swiatek both having new coaches. I feel like there are a lot of new partnerships that I'm just really interested in, and I think for the women's side, this year is going to be great. And on the men's side, of course, I'm just particularly interested in Novak Djokovic because last year, even though he did achieve his main goal, which is to win that Olympics title, apart from that, his year has not been great. It doesn't match up to the years he had prior. So I think I'm interested to see how he started off his year, because I feel like for him, how he started off his year is really important, especially because he's partnering with Andy Murray. So it's just really interesting. I want to see how their dynamics are on the court, because I feel like Andy Murray have so much experience that Novak Djokovic can really use to sort of elevate his game, because they've played against each other countless times. So yeah, and of course Carlos is going to chase his dream of winning all 4 majors. So yeah, I'm really interested to see him play against Sinner, because he does have like a great record against Sinner, who I feel like is his biggest competition at the moment. So if he's able to beat Sinner, I feel like he really have a great chance at winning the title. So yeah, okay, now I want to talk about the other 2 tournaments that's like sort of following this tournament, which is the Indian Wells and the Miami Open. So both of those 2 tournaments are known as not the Golden Slam, but like the 2, what's the word? I can't remember, but it's like the 2 important tournaments in America, and one of them happening in Indian Wells, the other happening in Miami. But I'm just interested because I feel like these 2 tournaments, even though some of the years they were like won by Djokovic or like some Jannik Sinner, Iga Swiatek, like some big names, but last year, especially on the women's side, we got some incredible winners like Danielle Collins, who said she was gonna retire, but she won that tournament. So I feel like both of these tournaments can have some surprising winners, and I feel like players like Jasmine Paolini, even though she didn't win the 2 like Indian Wells and Miami, she did win Qatar, which is a tournament that's sort of similar in that I feel like really anyone can win, and it's not like the Grand Slam where you have to play like, I just feel like Grand Slam have like a different feel to it. But for these, even though it's also worth 1,000 points, I feel like a lot of other players just have a really good chance of winning, especially let's say players like Coco Gauff. I feel like because both of these 2 tournaments are taking place in America, I feel like a lot of people would cheer her on, and Emma Navarro, Jessica Pegula sort of have the similar, I feel like, sense in that they all have the chance of winning these tournaments. So yeah, okay, now I want to talk about the other Grand Slam, which is French Open. So French Open, I think it's really interesting for both the men's and the women's side, even though I feel like a lot of people might disagree on the women's side, because we have Iga Swiatek, who's just completely dominant for 3 times in a row, and I feel like this year that's not gonna be that much different. But the only thing I think about is Naomi Osaka, who actually came back from pregnancy last year, really challenged Iga Swiatek at French Open and actually had won like a few match points. So I feel like even though a lot of people really look up to Iga in French Open as this sort of like incredible sort of like figure that it's impossible to beat her, but I think players like Jasmine Paolini, who played a close match to Iga in the, I think it's the Billie Jean King Cup at the end of the year, and just Naomi Osaka, I feel like a lot of the players, and Caroline Mukova as well, I feel like they really do have a chance of just challenging maybe even upsetting Iga. I know it's sort of like I'm asking for a lot, but I think just with Naomi putting Iga to like such a tight sort of match last year, I really think a lot of players have a chance. And on the men's side, I feel like I'm just looking forward to seeing Lorenzo Musetti really show his talent, because the clay court suits his game perfectly, and I feel like he really does have a chance of making it maybe to the final, making it to the semifinal in Roland Garros. But at the same time, I feel like Alexander Zverev really wants his sort of title, because I feel like he thinks he deserves a title, a Grand Slam title, and I feel like even though like as time progresses, his sort of like, maybe I would say like his chance of winning it is slowly decreasing, but I feel like last year he really had a great chance after going 2 sets up against Carlos Alcaraz. But this year, I mean, we never know which Carlos we're gonna get, so this might be a great year for him just to, I don't know, like get that title that I know he desperately wants. But at the same time, a lot of players are going to be posing great challenges to him. And now I want to talk about the other, just like mentioning some other Masters and just 1,000 tournaments that are also happening on clay, which include Rome and Madrid, which are just 2 tournaments that take place on clay as well. And I feel like Iga and just Sabalenka will have a great battle on those tournaments. But I just feel like for clay, it's really important to, like, Indian Wells is really important. And I also have, like, sort of, what is this? Like, a WTA tour thing that you guys can click onto. And this just have like all the tournaments listed, so if you guys are interested in checking it out, I'll link it for you guys. And also have an ATP version similar. So yeah, so I feel like the Rome and Madrid tournaments are really important. And then we move on to the grass court season. So the grass court season, I feel like is one of the seasons, especially on a women's side, that's the most open. Like this year, Barbara Krejcikova won the title in Wimbledon, and I just feel like everyone truly have a chance. Especially, I want to thank Aryna Sabalenka, who has won a title before, but I feel like her game really plays well on grass, and Iga and Sabalenka, I feel like aren't that strong on grass, so I feel like it's a great chance for just like some newcomers to win on grass. And I feel like Djokovic really want that Wimbledon title. I know Carlos has been dominating Wimbledon, but I think Djokovic, I mean, he can really do anything, and if his partnership with Murray works well, I feel like it's going to be incredible. I feel like my opinion on the partnership is it's either going to be incredibly successful or it's going to be just a disaster. But I think if it is successful, Novak really have a chance of challenging Carlos Alcaraz in the final of Wimbledon. And yeah, I feel like also I want to give credit to like Jack Draper and Lorenzo Musetti, because Musetti made it really far in Wimbledon, and I also think he has a chance of making it to the finals because of just how talented he is. And I feel like last year he's grown a lot, both physically and mentally, but mostly mentally, because I feel like prior to last year, I wouldn't see him as a player who can go really far, and I would see him as a player who just often crumbles at the most important moments. But last year, I feel like he's proven me wrong, just beating some incredible players, and I just didn't see him as a player like that. I've always saw him as a player who just crumbles when they face like a really high-ranked player. But last year, Musetti's been beating some incredibly big names. So yeah, interested in Wimbledon. And then we have some few like preparational tournaments, and then we get into the US Open, which is our last Grand Slam. So some preparation tournaments include Cincinnati, I feel like, and also like Quebec, Montreal, there's a tournament there. Both of these are 1,000 tournaments on the women's side, and I just feel like both of those two tournaments are important tournaments. So yeah, and of course we have the US Open, but for me I feel like it's really hard to preview it just because it's so far away. It's in August, which is like the end of August really, so it's so far away. I really can't think of anything, but at the same time I feel like the US Open always just have some surprising results because of how late in the year it is, and players are just exhausted, especially if you're high ranked and you're playing so many tournaments. I feel like when it comes down to the US Open, just so many people are exhausted, and a lot of sort of like newcoming players have the chance of challenging some like higher ranked players. So yeah. And then we have just the Asian swing on hard court. So some tournaments I want to mention is for the WTA, it's the China Open, and for the men's side, it's the Shanghai Masters. So both of these tournaments I feel like are a great way. Of course, for the WTA, the like China Open and the Wuhan Open are the last two Masters. Sorry, what am I saying? 1,000 tournaments. On the men's side, it's the Shanghai Open and the Paris Masters. But I feel like both of these all four of those tournaments are just like a great way for players who maybe haven't performed really well to just get more points and try to qualify for the end of the year final, which even though like isn't all that important compared to like a Grand Slam, but a lot of players just still want to participate in it. So the end of the year final, I feel like, is something that a lot of people really like to watch, despite it being like a group format. But I feel like because it's marketed as like the top 8 players from both the women's side and the men's side, a lot of people really tend to feed into that. So yeah, I feel like both of those two tournaments are just some great tournaments. And I think that sums up my episode this week. I hope you guys really enjoyed. If you guys haven't subscribed to my social medias, you should. It's on Instagram and Twitter using @TennisTraverse. That is @TennisTraverse. If you're listening on YouTube, comment, like, and subscribe. If you're listening on other social platforms, please, if you're listening on other streaming platforms, please give me a rating. If you guys can't tell, I'm a little bit out of it today, but I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and by the next time that we're talking, I feel like it's going to be the preparation into Australia and talking about Auckland and Brisbane, which are 2 preparational tournaments. So I really hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and I'll see you guys next week.